Christmas. How's your imagination? Can you imagine what it would be like to go out some evening and look at the stars and see a star that was actually moving? It'd be hard to believe, wouldn't it? You know, bright star. Back in the 1960s, which was time before many of you were even born, the space program was getting fired up, and somebody had this bright idea about sending up this humongous balloon. And so they put this big balloon, and I think it was something like 10 stories high. It was a huge thing. It was all silvery, and they filled it with air, and it went into orbit. And I can remember the night, the first time we went out and watched for it, and there it was, and there was this bright star going across the heavens, and that was exciting. You know, we thought, whoa, look at that. And we knew what it was, but just imagine if you saw that and you didn't know what it was. It would be kind of thrilling, wouldn't it? And what would happen if a knock came on the door, and you went to the door, and you opened the door, and there were people standing there, and they were saying, congratulations, and they had a big check out for $10 million. Would that get your attention?
Amen.
Yeah. That'd be a memorable experience, wouldn't it? Yeah. Or what if you went out to get in your car in the morning, and as you're getting in your car, you heard a noise, and the noise was identified as a brand new baby. And you go over and look in the corner, and there's a young woman who is, and her husband had just given birth to a baby. Would that be amazing? Would that be something that you would remember? You see what happened, and the reason we have some of the stories that we have about Christmas, because the writers of our scriptures, our Gospels, had a problem towards the end of the first century. The only thing we had was the book of Mark and the book of Thomas and some of Paul's writings, and nobody said anything about where and how Jesus was born. So there was a pondering about that, and they thought, well, it had to have been, I mean, this is the birth of Jesus, the birth of the man God. I mean, it had, had to be something spectacular. And they also remembered then something else that had just taken place with Jesus. This is recorded in the book of Luke. And it says, when he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. And he stood up to do the reading, and he handed the scroll of the prophet Isaiah. He was handed the scroll of the prophet Isaiah. He unrolled the scroll, and he found the place where it was written, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to announce pardon for prisoners and recovering of sight to the blind. He sent me to free the oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's amnesty. And after rolling up the scroll, he gave it back to the attendant and sat down, and the attention of everyone in the synagogue was riveted upon him. And he began by saying to them, today this scripture has come true as you listen. I am the fulfillment of the scriptures. So knowing that, then, the writers of the Gospels says, well, it must be in the scriptures. The scriptures, of course, were the Hebrew text, the law and the prophets. And so they began to find stories that would fill our imagination with wonder. Stories of stars moving and people bringing gifts and being in Bethlehem. And a man named Joseph who was a dreamer. And how he had the audacity to set his wife on a mule and take her from Nazareth to Bethlehem, 9 months pregnant. That had to be quite a ride. These are the things that would get our imagination going, would stir something within us. See, one of the problems we have with Christmas sometimes, and I think it's okay, but we have a tendency to begin to try and intellectualize it. Well, you can't intellectualize the whole Christmas story. It's never meant to be intellectualized. It's meant to be felt. It's meant to somehow or other stir our emotional being. And that's what it does. Have you ever noticed what happens to us? You know, I love that old song that guy used to sing, I just go nuts at Christmas. Anybody go nuts at Christmas? I was born into a household. My mother, she had a real strong decorating gene. Even when we lived in an apartment, you know, it was, we had chandeliers, she'd dangle red and green crepe paper around the house. It was always something, you know. And doing a Christmas tree was a really important thing. And this was back in the days when the lights were the ones you unscrewed. And so my dad would put the lights on the tree, and she would look at it and say, okay, it's just not right. There's 2 yellow lights together. And there's 2 green lights. And so she'd spend 2 hours unscrewing light bulbs and moving them here and moving there to get them, everything just right. And then just filling the house with things like that. And that's how I grew up. So when I became an adult, I was kind of a nutty that way too. I remember one year I had so many decorations, I had enough for 3 trees, so I put up 3 trees. I had a village, about 25 little houses and a train, and out front I had this big crest scene that lit up at night, and the house, of course, was covered with lights, and the trees had lights on them, and that was just sort of normal in my home. Then we sold our house, moved into an apartment back in May. Told the kids, we don't have room for all this Christmas stuff, and off it went. We don't even know where it went. But it was gone. So we had a box that said Christmas decor, and I opened it up, and wasn't a whole lot there, so we had to go buy some more. Oh, you gotta have something. But one of the things that I did discover was these. Those of you who are way back there can't hardly see them, but they're a little boy and little girl dressed in choir robes, and they're just singing their little hearts out. And you may not be able to see this, but on top of them is a wick, which means what? Candles. They're candles. Now the interesting thing, if that candle never gets lit, they're just ornaments. They've been sitting in our kitchen on the windowsill. I don't even know where they came from. They were just in this box. And I got to look at them and I thought, you know, until that lid is put on fire, they're just ornaments. It's only when they begin to light up with the flame that they become a light. And we begin to think about that. One of the things that Jesus said to us, I am the light of the world, and you are the light of the world. Did you ever think about that? Are you the light of your world? Well, one of the things that's going on now in the scientific community is this whole thing about quantum physics, and they've been able to figure out that everything, I mean everything in there exists in something called the field of quantum possibility. And all we do through the activities of our mind is we pull out of the fields and use it to create and project our life. So it's probably a little more accurate, but what Jesus said was that I'm the light of my world and you're the light of your world. You see, they're all sitting here and we maybe don't even realize, but what everybody here is doing is creating on a moment-to-moment, minute-to-minute basis a world, and outside of that, nothing else exists. It's an interesting proposition. It means that if I'm sitting at home and I'm in the living room and I'm watching television, then there's nothing besides that. There is no bedroom. There's no kitchen, nor anything else. It only becomes a kitchen when I go in there. That's a lot for us to grasp, isn't it? and I don't even begin to know how they know this, mathematics beyond my capabilities, but I believe it's just really true. And so being then, the fact that I am the light of my world, am I really lighting my world up? Am I taking 100% responsibility for everything that goes on? Am I living like someone who is full of life and energy? Because that's what light really represents. It represents the energy of love, the energy of compassion, the energy of joy and happiness and everything that you would ever want can come from this light within us, this energy within us. And I believe that's really what Jesus was about, and that's what this birth was about. It's about the birth of that in us, which can light up our worlds. And we don't always see that. We do see the decorations, we do see the tree, but we've been using these things for absolutely centuries to remind us of this activity of the birth. See, one of the things I believe is that it actually began in the church, the nativity, or they were putting together the calendar of events, and saint days, and celebrations back in the 4th century in Rome, and they found that there was a celebration that had begun by decree in the 2nd century. It was called Dies Natalis Solis Invicti. Now, all of you Latin scholars know exactly what that means. But in case you don't, it means this: the birthday of the unconquered sun. See, they were celebrating the fact that now the sun has reached this lowest point and is going to come back. It never dies. It's never really conquered. And then they discovered a quote from one of the Jewish prophets who said, Jesus was the birth of the righteous Son, the Son of Righteousness, S-U-N. So they begin to see Jesus as the Son, representing the God differentiating from the Sun God. And that was the beginning then of Christmas. And things began to happen. We began to develop other ways of remembering the event. We began to develop people like a fellow named Nicholas, who became a saint. You've heard of St. Nicholas. Today he's called Santa Claus. Some of the old stories and legends about him were that he used to climb on the roof and drop gold coins in bags down through the chimneys for people who were in need. Or if it was out in the area where they were living in yurts? There were these things made of reindeer hide. And there was a mushroom growing in that area that was red and white and reminded people of Christmas, so he would climb the yurts and drop these mushrooms through the smoke hole. Doesn't sound very much different from Santa Claus coming down the chimney. Did that confuse you when you were a child? And yet it happened. I was living in an apartment at that time. I was 4, 5, 6 years old. And they said, Santa Claus come down the chimney. I said, but we don't have a chimney. And my dad would say, it'll happen anyway. And it did. I didn't always believe my dad. So it's not an intellectual experience. It's an emotional experience. And something really does happen to us. But we have to let it happen. We have to, and I hear a lot of stuff about the fact, well, we're not celebrating Christmas the right way. And James Dillard Freeman wrote an article. It was in last month's Unity magazine. And he says, just leave Christmas alone. Christmas makes us add a touch of color to our everyday rooms and everyday life. Christmas is a wonder and a magic meant to cheer the heart. It wasn't meant to cheer the intellect. It's meant to cheer the heart so that we can be everything that this light that we are has the capability of being. So where love is needed, we can love. Jesus gave us some pretty tough things to do. He said, love one another as I have loved you. Try that by yourself. I can guarantee you there's somebody in your life right now that's making it hard. And then to top that up, he says, love your enemy. Now, that's going a little too far, but so how do we do that? The only way we do it is to recognize that there's that in us which can, and get ourselves out of the way, to allow that light that we are to make our world one of peace and joy, happiness, love, compassion. That's what gets us out of bed at 7 o'clock on Christmas Eve morning. Come over here and put lasagnas together. And cook lasagnas to give to... And what happens is we go out of here just feeling so blessed. Because we've used that within ourselves. It has the capacity to light up our world in a way that we like to see it lit. Is that how you want to live your life? That's how I want to live my life. I look at my little choir people here, and I realize, I have a choice. I can be the light of my world, or I can be a decoration. So the question is, what do you want to be? I was almost to the point where I was willing to be a decoration a year ago. Then something happened. I ran into a guy named Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he taught me a meditation. In this meditation, to sit and imagine this energy coming up your spinal column and coming out through your head. And you do that 10 or 12 times in meditation, and I can guarantee you, you are on fire. So try it. I mean, it's incredible what can happen. I mean, I got so wound up, I told everybody I was going to run a 5K. And I had a hard time walking across the living room. You should see me now, I got calf muscles that big around. Because I'm not doing it. You see. So I don't want to be a decoration in my life. Do you? No, I want to be the light. I want to be filled with the energy and the love of God, bringing it into my... I want to be the light of my world. So the question today, a month or so ago I was here and I gave you a question. What would it feel like to be a younger person? To be in a 55-year-old body? Feels pretty good, I can tell you. But the question today is, what would it feel like to really be the light of my world? What would that be? Try it. Because you are lights, and you are love. And this can be the greatest time of your life. As a light, not a decoration. God bless and Merry Christmas.